But a
Yeah,
lot
I think
of
you
people
can find
do
that
have
also.
something on. It has been reality, some people doing survey, some people doing browser, which is good, yeah.
Right.
I'd like to welcome you all to this meeting of the Sustainability Advisory Board on Monday, December 3rd. Tonight, we're meeting in Room SB of the Safety Building,
Yeah.
and we do have a full quorum tonight for our Sustainability Board. Thank you all for coming. I'd also like to thank the mayor, the city manager, and the other board and committee heads that were, council members that were able to join us tonight, because the students are going to have lots of fun stuff to share, so I'm very glad you were able to make it. Before that, I do have one quick public comment. This is a public comment from someone who is not here, but she did forward me this. And this is the point, Scott, where the artwork I sent you could go up, if you have, or if you're able to do that. This is a sign that, because of previous students' works, we had done an idle-free zone through the city, through the school district, and this is a sign that has been posted in 3 different places at Traeger Elementary and Middle School, and it is having an impact. People are shutting off their cars, and when they've been thanked by parents, they've smiled. So it seems to be something that's good. So that's our public comment for tonight, brought to you by Margie. And the next thing on the agenda is the approval of minutes from our November 5th meeting. Could I hear a motion to accept?
So move.
Seconded.
Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, then all in favor of approving the minutes as written?
All right.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, now on to the fun stuff for the night. We have Jim Feldman's class here, and Jim, take it away.
Thank you, Margie. And I just wanted to introduce myself. My name's Jim Feldman. I'm the director of the Environmental Studies program at UW Oshkosh. And this year's senior seminar project was working with something called the Green Infrastructure Audit, which I'll let the students explain. Just wanted to thank you all for once again giving your time to the students, both tonight and as they've worked through this pretty technical and complicated material, and particularly to Stephen, who really helped this project move along. So with that brief introduction, I'm going to turn it over to the students. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Anna Sturts.
I'm Oshkosh. I'm Brian Lasser.
And we are going to ask you just to speak into the microphone as you go through, just so that it gets picked up on the recording.
Okay, thank you. Over the course of this semester, our class has looked at the issue of stormwater management in Oshkosh, as well as ways we can implement green infrastructure to help address this issue. So, as Jim has previously mentioned, we have used the Green Infrastructure Audit tool that was published by the Wisconsin Sea Grant. This was written by the Wisconsin Sea Grant with Wisconsin specifically in mind, and how to audit local city codes and ordinances, as well as ways to implement green infrastructure. Before we get into too much detail, it is important to know what we mean by green infrastructure in relations to water management. It is an approach to water management that protects, restores, and mimics the natural water cycle. By mimicking the natural water cycle, we are allowing the process of evaporation and infiltration of rain and snowmelt to help reduce the amount of stormwater runoff. We hope to implement green infrastructure to help with the natural water cycle by adding permeable materials, landscaping, architectural design, and community outreach into the city of Oshkosh. The importance of green infrastructure can affect many different aspects. We have all seen a situation like this where automotive fluids as well as other chemicals can be in runoff and end up in the sewers and into the local Fox River and Lake Winnebago. Stormwater runoff is the leading source of pollution in the United States waterways. This can pose a risk to the ecosystem as well as public health. Not only does water runoff affect the ecosystem, but in urban landscapes, flooding is a much higher risk as it can cause a threat to hazardous conditions as well as economic damage to property. With our goal, we are looking for implementing more green infrastructure, we have discussed the issue of stormwater management with local city planners, engineers, and other stakeholders. We have audited the local codes of Oshkosh and ordinances in relation to stormwater management in hopes to adjust or add additions to the current codes to benefit the Oshkosh community. Codes and ordinances that encourage or require the use of green infrastructure can help the community improve its health and promote public health, as well as protecting private and public properties. For the first aspect of our project, we are going to discuss permeable materials and surfacing. A permeable material would be a material that allows liquids and gases to pass through and infiltrate to the ground. We will go over the different types of permeable materials we can use, as well as potential issues to implementing them, what the current codes and ordinances say in regards to permeable materials, as well as the costs, what other cities in Wisconsin are doing with them, and our suggestions for the city. So on the screen, you can see there are different examples of permeable pavements. Permeable pavers is a type of tile that works like cobblestone and allows the infiltration of water through the cracks. Permeable concrete, as well as permeable asphalt, is a more porous mixture compared to the traditional that allows the water to go through. And grass pavers is the pouring of concrete in a lattice-like structure in lawn that allows the water to infiltrate through the grass while preventing soil erosion.
So being that permeable materials are relatively new technology and it's not really in the public consciousness, there's a lot of concerns about permeable pavements and what it can provide in terms of stormwater management. Specifically in Wisconsin, there's concerns about freeze and thaw cycles and how the materials will perform in the winter and over time. As you can see in the picture on the top, the pervious concrete lets water soak through into the soil instead of forming ice on like in the asphalt. So this reduces the amount of salt that is needed during the winter, which in turn, the amount of salt can be reduced by as much as 70%, which in turn reduces the high upfront costs and over time can make permeable materials a cheaper and more economically efficient type of concrete, and Brandon will talk about the cost more in a minute. And there's also concerns about maintenance, but in a long-term 10-year study, it was shown that permeability only reduces by about 10 to 20% over 10 years, and in that time it also is still able to infiltrate 100-year storms. So it's still viable over a long period of time. And then our audit, the average grade for our questions was around a C. For most of the questions, there was little to no language about permeable pavements or permeable materials, but the good news is there wasn't any code that doesn't allow for permeable materials, which makes it a relatively easy fix for the Oshkosh zoning codes. For example, question number 4, are low volume street sections allowed or encouraged to be permeable? We took sample language about new driveways because there is no current code about low volume streets. So the current code for new driveways says that they must be constructed with concrete, asphalt, brick, or stone, but it's a really easy, simple fix to just add or permeable materials or permeable pavers, which will make it easier for citizens or developers or the city to implement these types of stormwater management tools.
I wanted to look at benchmarking cities that are within Wisconsin and within the area of the geographic processes that occur and the climate processes that are here as well. So in the lower left, we have Madison, of one of the cities that I selected, and the lower right, Franklin, Wisconsin, that I also selected. So in Madison, they tested a half-acre site that tested both or all three permeable pavement, asphalt, and concrete. The data suggested that there is a high value of infiltration in the three processes that was taking place. Cost was lower in that section of area over the regular parking lot, and the reduced use of salt over that section of area also was reduced. So as you can see, this was created so that Wisconsin could have a system of regulations and standards that was used for the state. They tested only a small little sample. If you take this into consideration, a larger system, more value to be taken into place over time. Franklin, they took the Rawson Common Center, which holds a lot of value for the city. They have a system of a nursing place, a retail store, and stuff like that. There, they have a standard of people going in and out, so you can see that it can withstand the everyday use. It removes 40% of the total suspended solids and can withstand the 100-year flood. The cost, I looked at a system that was tested at the UC David School over 25 years as it was taking place in 2003, and then extended the time and the value of each system. So as you can see on the bottom of it, the cost in total, that permeable pavement is cheaper by about $4 a square foot, and prolong that for 25 years, the greater savings of $65,000 was added to the city just because of this system being in place. The upper sections are all the maintenance costs, maintenance stuff that they had to do over the 25 years, or what they would project that you need to do. As you see, you can look into the report that we will give you for more information and stuff like that that you can get from this graph.
So like I said earlier, it's a pretty simple fix just to add or allowing permeable materials into the code, which is the first bullet point. But to take it a step further would be to encourage permeable materials to be implemented on new parking lots or new areas that could have permeable materials. So the second example, the second bullet point would allow and encourage permeable materials to be implemented throughout the future in Oshkosh. And now we'll turn it over to the landscaping group.
Hello, my name is Tom Summers. This is Kyle Lichtenberg, Tyler Costello, and Logan Klein, and we collectively analyzed the landscape's role and importance in the management of stormwater for the city of Oshkosh. We looked at the city's ordinances, researched green infrastructure techniques, and what other places are doing, as well as the costs and barriers to formulate recommendations to improve Oshkosh's stormwater management. I'll begin with some background on the importance of landscaping and stormwater management. The shape, composition, and slope of the landscape determines whether stormwater issues are major or minor. A landscape designed without stormwater management in mind can cause a wide array of problems such as pollution, erosion, and flooding. Using green landscaping techniques such as naturally vegetated buffers by bodies of water and rain gardens have been shown to reduce the harmful effects of stormwater. Why is this important to the city of Oshkosh? Implementing green landscaping infrastructure to manage stormwater will help keep the waterways, which the city of Oshkosh relies on for water, recreation, and tourism, clean, safe, and continuing to provide for the community in the future. It will also reduce the potential harm inflicted on the community from stormwater issues. Using the green infrastructure tool, we analyzed the city's ordinances to see what the city was doing well and where improvements could be made. We divided our audit into 4 categories: landscaping design and features, use of native vegetation, parking lot design and landscaping, and snow storage. I'll begin with landscaping design and features. This the city did quite well. The city allows for bioswales and rain gardens and clearly defines, and they allow them to count towards landscaping points or minimums. And to explain landscaping minimums, in case you don't know what those are, basically certain areas, depending on how they're zoned, have certain landscaping requirements that need to be met. And so by allowing for rain gardens and bioswales to count towards those points or minimums, they're thus promoting the use of those. In terms of use of native vegetation, overall, the city got a B in this area. Language could be added to encourage native plantings in disturbed areas, and there might be possible overuse of turf grass in areas that don't necessarily require it. For parking lot design and landscaping, this also received a B. While it did some well in some areas, they could promote more use of retention and bioretention areas and parking lots. And for snow storage, using our tool, this did not grade well. The city does not have clear snow storage plans or directions in the audit and the ordinances themselves, so using our tool did not grade so well.
In order to compare green infrastructure in the city of Oshkosh with that of other municipalities, we've included a benchmarking section that provides examples of successful landscaping initiatives undertaken by other communities. The two case studies that I'd like to share with you come from Ferndale, Michigan, and Cross Plains, Wisconsin, where the use of native vegetation and bioretention strategies have been shown to be effective green infrastructure measures that improve stormwater management. I'd like to showcase the Planned Natural Landscapes program developed by the city of Ferndale as a best management practice for encouraging native vegetation in residential areas. The use of native vegetation in place of turf grass or impermeable pavement has been shown to reduce stormwater runoff and improve infiltration. It is also a great way to help conserve native wildflowers and pollinator species. Additionally, the program has led to a number of educational outreach opportunities within the community. By registering a property with the city through an online form, residents can declare their property as a planned natural landscape. Individuals can then convert their turf grass lawns to a mix of native wildflowers and prairie grasses. An example of such a conversion is pictured here on the left. I spoke with Ferndale Council member Melanie Piana about the program, and she supports it because it allows residents to directly participate in the city's green infrastructure. Ferndale's environmental sustainability planner, Aaron Kettle, shared with me that one of the program's initial problems was that some plantings were either accidentally cut down by the city or intentionally by unhappy neighbors. The city is now collaborating with a student-led marketing team to produce signage like the image on the right, so that planned natural landscapes can be more easily recognized. Such a program in Oshkosh would be a great way to promote species conservation and better stormwater management practices at a local level. Another example of a community embracing green infrastructure that I would like to highlight is the Black Earth Creek project in the village of Cross Plains, Wisconsin. Cross Plains is home to a popular stretch of the Black Earth Creek, which is a first-class cold water trout stream. The stream attracts anglers from throughout the Midwest, and the community takes pride in protecting this natural resource. Increasing development, however, has put pressure on the stream and its watershed. A partnership of several engineering firms was formed to find a way to support both water quality and economic development. The use of bioswales was determined to be the best management practice to achieve this goal. Additional measures were taken to protect wooded areas and to avoid soil compaction through the use of deep tilling. A study of the site was carried out by the U.S. Geological Survey over the course of the project, and they determined that the use of bioswales allowed the development project to continue while simultaneously protecting the creek. Since Oshkosh is located along the Fox River, we could similarly benefit from including bioswales as an important stormwater management strategy in new development projects.
Next, we're going to discuss some of the costs and barriers that we encountered in our research. First, the differences between turf grass and native vegetation. We found that in all instances, turf grass has a higher installation and maintenance cost than traditional prairie grasses and native vegetations. This cost comes mostly from the need to water and maintain and trim turf grass. If you look at the graph on the right, we found that if Oshkosh were to convert an area equal in size to 10% of its current park space, over the span of 20 years, the city would save somewhere between $730,000 and $940,000. Each part of the graph shows the difference between sodded turf, seeded turf, and prairie grass. Next, we have the cost for bioswales. We've mentioned these a couple times. For anyone who doesn't know, a bioswale is a specially constructed drainage area, usually found alongside paved areas such as parking lots or roadways. They're specially constructed to have water flow into them, where they are then drained through the soil and through the plant roots, which removes pollution from it and allows the water return back to the ground system. We found that bioswales have a higher upfront cost than traditional parking lot islands and parking lot edgings. They also have a higher maintenance price from removing pollution from them. However, this cost is offset somewhat by the fact that they require less piping underneath them, and they also reduce the amount of runoff and pollution that enters into the city's storm system. Some of the barriers we encountered for turf grass and native vegetation is that most people prefer the look of traditional turf grasses such as Kentucky bluegrass. People find that it looks more properly managed and that prairie grass has a more unkempt look to it. People also prefer turf grass for recreational spaces. For bioswales, as we mentioned before, they have a higher upfront cost and cost of maintenance. This would also be an issue because businesses would be the ones expected to pay this difference when they're making constructions of parking lots. They would also not be the ones to see the benefits of that. That would mostly be the city and the community that would see the benefits of it. We also found a popular misconception about bioswales is that they serve as a breeding ground for mosquitoes. However, this isn't true, since a properly constructed and maintained bioswale would drain of all water within 1 to 2 days after the storm event has passed.
Next, I will be talking about strategies and suggestions. For native vegetation, the city of Oshkosh could adopt similar standards seen in Ferndale, Michigan. A sign indicating that the city approves of this type of native vegetation on public and private property lets community members know that this kind of vegetation is allowed within the city of Oshkosh. The benefits of deep-rooted vegetation could reduce and limit the amount of stormwater onto the urban landscape. If there were less barriers on the public and private owners of implementing native vegetation, this would allow them to plant aesthetically pleasing vegetation, as well as its benefits in mitigating stormwater from the urban landscape. This next slide shows some images of what urban native vegetation would look like. For parking lots, increasing features such as bioswales and rain gardens as parking lot islands and larger parking lots would help mitigate runoff from these surfaces. Increasing in such features would reduce water flowing into the city's stormwater system when large rain events occur. One way to persuade new development that are installing these large parking lots would be increase the incentive in points, and an increase in incentives would persuade these property owners to implement such features. As mentioned before, snow storage received a low grade. Snow storage in bioretention areas, the Oshkosh ordinance does not explicitly say that these areas prohibit snow from being stored in them. The ordinance only mentions to keep these areas free from trash, weeds, debris, and dead or dying plants. A revised ordinance could fix this problem. For snow storage in site plans, the Public Works has stated that they require snow storage to be shown on site plans. This does not mean that the property owner always follows those site plans. A verbal or written warning could allow property owners to fix their improper management of storing snow on their properties. If snow continues to be stored in prohibited areas, the property owner could be faced with a potential fine. The city could also suggest to property owners with large parking lots to implement a sign that indicates that this site stores snow. This would help the property owner store their snow in the appropriate areas. Now we will turn it over to the architecture group.
and this is Katie Ann, and we are the Architectural and Design Group. In our section, we will be going through the background to explain a little bit more about our topic, and we will also explain the audit we did based on current codes, and we will also talk about barriers and costs, as well as looking at other cities who have also been working on these kinds of projects. And then to wrap up, we'll go through some suggestions that we would like to make. So we have conducted research on green infrastructure to provide to the city of Oshkosh for some considerations to improve the architecture and design. Our section includes standards and guidelines for buildings and streetscapes. By streetscapes, I mean the visual effect and quality of a street. Our focus was on planter boxes, rain barrels, cisterns, curb bump outs, green roofs, trees, bioswales, and rain gardens, which you can see each one of those are presented on the screen. The main issue we found was the lack of language in the ordinances. So if you refer to the handout that was given to you, you can see that each one of these is going to be summed up. And for each one of these, the acknowledgement section was given an F also because there was no definition of green infrastructure in any of the standards, such as what are planter boxes. When talking about the right-of-way, there was no reference to what kind of green infrastructure could go into the right-of-way. Facade is a fancy word for the side of a building. There was multiple items listed in the ordinances saying what could project 2 feet off of the building, but none of these items were in reference to green infrastructure. A waiver of design is non-existent, and there is no slope requirement for a pitched roof. And for streetscapes, which you can kind of see in the picture, there is no complete streets design or ordinance, but these aspects are not prohibited in the city of Oshkosh since some of these have been implemented, such as bike lanes on Irving Avenue and friendly pedestrian features such as curb bump outs and extensions on North Main Street. So overall, the grade given to the city for architecture and design was an F. So if you refer to the handout again, the third question states, do design standards allow siting of stormwater control measures along facades? And so this is the exact code language that is in the ordinances minus what is bolded. And so simply adding in the few words that are bolded, this code will go from an F to an A. And this will help the city and community members save time and energy from having to grant and receive these special requests. So moving on to barriers, as I mentioned, the ordinances are not specific enough to architecture and design. Not enough community members are knowledgeable about green infrastructure. For example, if a person is implementing a rain barrel, they might not know what to do with the extra rainwater that they have. Residential versus commercial, residential buildings will not benefit as much as commercial buildings due to the size that they have, as well as not having enough money to implement the same kinds of green infrastructure. Which brings me to financial concerns, which the upfront cost for green infrastructure is a lot more expensive, so it might deter people from wanting to use this type of method. There are many cost variables when implementing green infrastructure. In my presentation, I will use the term GI to refer to green infrastructure, and when I refer to gray infrastructure, I mean conventional infrastructure that's being used currently. Green infrastructure is highly variable, and project costs for implementation can depend on a variety of factors such as size, existing infrastructure, materials, and the quality of those materials being used. Some of the example ranges are shown in the table on the screen. Rain barrels can vary from anywhere to 72 cents a gallon to $2.50 a gallon. These costs depend mainly on material that's being used and the size of the barrel. Terrace trees are another type of green infrastructure important for shading and stormwater management. Higher quality and mature trees should be used rather than cheaper trees. They may cost a bit more, but will provide a higher yield and benefits. In the instance on the screen, tree prices vary depending on the species being used and then the age of the tree. Multifunctionality is another important cost factor in the ability of GI. This means that green infrastructure provides benefits to the community rather than just stormwater management. These benefits can include aesthetic appeal, improved air and water quality, and community revitalization. Considering multifunctionality during the planning process can help the most with lowering costs overall. According to Dan Tross, an urban forester in Appleton, including foresters and conservation planners during the design and planning process can help with identifying these benefits and the impacts of green infrastructure. Looking at annual benefits, green infrastructure may cost more upfront, but annual and long-term benefits can outweigh these costs. In Lancaster City, Pennsylvania, their GI plan has proven this with their implementation. They have a population of almost 60,000, which is similar to that of Oshkosh. Their green infrastructure plan is expected to reduce stormwater runoff by more than 1 billion gallons per year. This isn't the only benefit of the plan that they see. Implementation costs are expected to be between $51.6 to $94.5 million, but their savings outweigh these costs. Long-term benefits of implementation could save the city upwards of $120 million in avoiding great infrastructure capital costs while earning upwards of $5 million in annual benefits. Some of the green infrastructure projects that have been implemented include a reconstructed parking lot with bioretention ponds, which equal about $1,100 in annual benefits. A reconstructed street that includes bioretention ponds and permeable pavements that equal around $2,300 in annual benefits. If you look at the screen, the picture shows what a curb bump out on a street would look like with the bioretention pond in it. The third example is an urban park that was implemented with a variety of green infrastructure and provided more than $5,500 in annual benefits. Small projects alone may not reach millions in savings, but this is why multiple green infrastructure projects should be implemented to maximize the highest amount of benefits. In Milwaukee, it's a bit bigger of a city, but their work with incorporating green infrastructure is significant. Their Green Seams program focused on purchasing land along the waterfront for preservation and flood control. Their rain barrel program has resulted in the sale of 50,000 rain barrels. And their Fresh Coast Green Solutions program uses existing gray infrastructure and new green infrastructure. It's important to note that the funding for green infrastructure came from the funds for gray infrastructure, so there wasn't a need for new funds. The Sustain program was used to measure and evaluate the effectiveness of GI implementation, and they chose a small pilot area of the CSSA, which is the Combined Sewer Service Area, to evaluate. The savings of just the pilot area were a $2.7 million increase in property value, reduced pumping costs of $46,000 over 20 years, 435 acres of reduced stormwater runoff, 64,000 kilowatt reduction in energy use, which meant an upwards of $5,700 in savings over 20 years. The cost savings and annual benefits were then applied to the total CSSA, and benefits in the millions were seen. The exact savings can be found within the final report, along with other cities' green infrastructure initiatives and their costs and savings as well. After looking at costs, benefits, barriers, and all the other factors to be considered, there are a few suggestions we propose for the city of Oshkosh to take into consideration. Rewriting ordinances to include language that encourages green infrastructure, designing a comprehensive plan that includes pilot areas and projects like those in Milwaukee. This would include implementing multiple green infrastructure projects throughout Oshkosh that vary in design and size. And the plan would help show how different green infrastructure projects could be multifunctional and work together. Examples of these would include terraceries, curb bump outs, bioswales, and other green infrastructure that we've outlined in the report. We also suggest using financial incentives to encourage GI implementation. And finally, this is outlined more detailed in the final report, but we suggest readjusting the current point system to give more points to native vegetation and provide a clear definition of what native vegetation is. And with that, we'll turn it over to the Community and Outreach Program.
Hello, my name is Janine Carroll, and this is Allie Woodruff. Our section will be slightly different than the previous presentations, as ours focus less on the code and ordinances in the audit and more on community outreach and education that the city of Oshkosh is providing on green infrastructure and stormwater management to our residents. So So for our quick outline, we're going to look at our audit, some of the costs and barriers, the benchmarking that we have conducted, the stakeholders that we talked to, some suggestions, and the significance of community outreach and education. So for our audit, most of our grades were found to be above a C. 6 out of the 8 questions did score above a C grade. However, 2 of the questions we did find to be a C or below, and this was due to having no code language or little code language, little to no policy language, or it was very unclear who to talk with to get answers. One example of this is question number 7 in our handout. This is there a review or permit process in place to facilitate the disconnection of foundation drains? We did not come across any codes regarding this question, and we asked and talked to a lot of people and were transferred to many people within the city, but it was still unclear who to talk to get a clear answer, and we never really did get a clear answer, so that is why we ended up giving this one an F. When looking at the costs, there can be many costs to the city to overcome. Initial costs of running programs and creating programs is obviously a factor, but we could gain money back in different ways in how we handle our programs. Within that, the cost of creating the programs and the cost of supplies is something to overcome. Some rain barrel kits can run between $16 to $100 depending on the stuff available and what you want to give out to the people coming. However, this could be a cost to the city residents, and they pay as they come to the program, or the city could provide them for free, which means more cost to the city. Time cost to staff. So paying staff for their time in creating, running the programs is something, and also training people to run the programs could be a big cost, or if you have volunteer works to come in, but paying people and having people take time out of their day to run and create programs is definitely a cost to look at. Some of the barriers within community outreach is that there may be low community support and participation. There might be low support due to people not really embracing change in their community, and with that goes people don't want to volunteer to help create the green infrastructure. Our research suggests that one of the biggest barriers to overcome is staff education and making sure that all staff or most staff in all departments know what green infrastructure is and how to effectively communicate that to our residents. Another thing is to look at the long-term outcomes. As the city knows their long-term outcomes of green infrastructure, if we can communicate that to the residents, that will only gain more support for the cause of adding green infrastructure. And with that, if people do not know, there might be low funding that we need to overcome, as people may not want to fund the city for adding these if they don't know what the benefits can be.
To get a better understanding of how some of these issues could be solved, we looked at a number of different cities to see what they're doing with community outreach and education. First, we looked at the city of Milwaukee, and they're doing a Respect Our Waters campaign. One of the things they're doing with this campaign is they're holding interviews on Fox News, and they're just talking about how residents can prevent stormwater runoff. The Respect Our Waters campaign, they also focus on handing out promotional products like buttons and stickers, as well as informational pamphlets at community events. And they also send out newsletters. And all this information is focused on preventing stormwater runoff. The city of Milwaukee also does an Adopt a Drain program where residents can adopt a drain and clean it before and after a rainfall event. And there's no liability to it or anything. It's just something that they can volunteer to and do on their free time. Then we also looked at the city of San Marcos, Texas, and they used a collaboration. So they collaborated with the University of Texas, and together the university and the city had an art competition where they created the logo on the bottom. And this was actually a storm drain cover, and this helps bridge the gap between the two communities, and using art actually helped as a new way of communication, bringing new people into the conversation, because not a lot of people are going to be interested in learning about community or learning about stormwater management. So bringing art into the conversation is a new way we can bring more people into the conversation. And then we also spoke with a number of people about community outreach and education in Oshkosh and how they thought we were doing. So our key influencers, our key stakeholders are influencers that have some sort of say on what happens in the city. And a couple of the people we talked to were city employees like Stephen Wiley and Bill Sturm. In general, our key stakeholders expressed that there is a need for improving community outreach and education in Oshkosh. Specifically, we need to reach a broader audience, and we could do this through collaboration with organizations like the university or through increasing social media presence. We also spoke with a number of primary stakeholders, and these are people who are directly affected by what happens within the city, so specifically Oshkosh residents. We spoke with both Misty McPhee and Michelle Bogdan-Mutzel, and we found that overall our primary stakeholders expressed a need for more outreach and education in Oshkosh, and that sometimes it was difficult for residents to find information about stormwater management. So based on all of our information that we found, we have a couple of suggestions for the city of Oshkosh. One of the easiest things that the city could do is just create specific language for the codes. This could help eliminate gray areas and just promote green infrastructure in Oshkosh. Like Janine mentioned earlier, one of the biggest problems we found was the education of staff. So we want to make sure that staff is provided with additional education and that they are encouraged to be involved in community outreach programs along with the community. And then something we thought would be interesting in the city of Oshkosh is using art as communication and collaborating with the university. Using art as a communication, like I said earlier, can definitely help bring new people into the conversation, and it's just kind of a fun way to almost trick people into learning about green infrastructure, because they're gonna go, to an art show or to an event where they're seeing different kinds of cool green infrastructure projects, and in the process, they're gonna learn about stormwater management. We also thought that an adopt a drain program would be easy to do in Oshkosh. Families could adopt a drain together, and they could allow this could allow families with young kids to help their kids get an understanding of how we need to take care of the environment even at a young age. And then our findings and suggestions here are especially important to consider because community outreach is a really important part of sustainability. For starters, when you focus on the community, there's going to be an enhanced sense of community and people are going to trust their public officials more. If we give community members a chance to have a say in what goes on in their community, they're going to feel that they are being honest, or that their public officials are being honest with them, and this is going to also help improve their quality of life and civic pride. In addition, people are also going to have an enhanced understanding of the ecosystem when they're brought into the conversation, and this can just help people understand their human impact on the environment. And they're going to understand that humans can affect the environment in bad ways, but also in positive ways. And this can help enhance people's responsibility and ownership in their local environment. And overall, socially driven programs are more effective because one of the biggest barriers of green infrastructure implementation is hesitation from community and staff. So getting them on board is especially crucial. Thank you all for taking the time to come out and listen to us speak today, and a special thank you to everyone that helped us with this project. We're now going to open it up for questions.
Lori, you have a question and you don't have a microphone. Can I ask you to come up here, please? I'm sorry.
So I have two questions for you. One is, how did you all define green infrastructure in the beginning? As we looked at different examples, did you have a working definition?
For the green infrastructure.
Microphone, please. I'm sorry.
For the green infrastructure definition, we took the definition straight from the green infrastructure audit tool that was presented by the Wisconsin Sea Grant. And
what is that?
So I have it that, I'm sorry. It's an approach to water management that protects, restores, and mimics the natural water cycle.
Okay, thank you. That was question number one. Question number two, there was a slide about the place in Michigan that had the, what was it, PND, preferred native something. I can't remember what it's called.
Land
natural landscape.
Land natural landscape. So you probably don't have the answer to this, but it's just something to kind of chew on a little bit, and that is, in those areas where they instituted those programs, almost every city deals with in the summer, we end up having to send all kinds of citations for overgrown lawn and weeds and things like that. By any chance, did that help reduce the number of lawn cutting issues in those areas where they did those kinds of planned native, what was it again?
Planned natural landscape.
Planned natural landscape, PNL.
Yeah, that's a good question, and the people that I talked with from Michigan didn't really address that, so I can't really answer that.
Does anybody else have any questions for the students? Steve, would you mind coming up to the microphone, please?
I've asked this one before.
Both of them should be live, I think.
The question came up, what do you do with the extra water in rain barrels? When I was a kid, our neighbor lady collected water, and she used it to wash her hair. And one day, the neighbor kid and I washed carrots in her rain barrel, and she was not happy with us. It got very muddy. Really, the two questions are, and I've mentioned this before, about terraces. In all your research, other communities, terraces are kind of a pain in the neck. They're difficult to cut. They don't serve a lot of purpose. When our street was being redone a couple of years ago, I thought it'd be great until the grass was put down to plant tomatoes or something. Did you find communities that are making better use of their terraces other than grass? And that's usually, when I say it's so difficult, because they're not wide enough as a rule for a couple of suites, but with a more grass goes into the streets if people aren't careful. Are there better uses of terraces? My first question, did you find anything?
In the final report, we have 4 other cities, and the only other things that were outlined with terraces would be like, we talked to Dan Trost, which I mentioned in the presentation, and he said that vegetation isn't necessarily, like vegetables and produce isn't necessarily, it's an idea to consider, but we didn't find too many other cities that are doing that. The other use for the terraces would be like smaller shrubs and like flowers, so that it doesn't impede, because the thing with trees is that it's high enough that it doesn't, around corners people can see with traffic, so it doesn't impede traffic. So shrubs would be the other situation. He said that with if you let vegetables and produce like overgrow, it can impede that site.
A follow-up to that while you're here. Wait a minute, I have a microphone. Was there anything about snow plowing and the salt and how that would affect vegetation along the terrace?
Our group did not look into anything with snow storage. I don't know if the other group found anything about snow.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
That's all right.
What was your question again, please?
I was wondering if what's grown on a terrace has to be, if you have to take into consideration the fact that snowplows are going to throw salt and things up there too.
What I found is that I didn't see any salt impeding on the growth of vegetation, but that could be something to take into account for trying to grow shrubs. If they start dying, then maybe start switching to turf grass. There's something that won't die from salt as fast.
We don't want turf grass.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And the other question I have is, up until 10 or 12 years ago, we had some huge storms that took out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of old, large trees in the city. Has there been any research done? And Councilman Herman, he's lived here his whole life, and I don't recall the flooding that we've had recently. Until we spent all the money on storm, detention basins. I don't recall as a kid that kind of flooding. Did the loss of that massive amount of trees between Dutch elm disease and then these storms create our flooding problems? Has there been any research here or anywhere to say that we should be more aggressive in planting trees and bigger trees? Sort of a statement and a two-part question.
Not that we came across any of it, but after talking to some of our stakeholders, such as Heather McCombs and Dan Trost, the forester from Appleton, with trees, it helps to lower the heat island index with shading, and there's a lot of other benefits with capturing rainwater, but we didn't find anything about if it's influenced the flooding.
Okay, thank you.
This deals with soil contamination. When you looked at any of the, like the permittable materials and landscaping, did any soil testing get done to see what kind of soil contaminants we may have in the city and throughout? For those of you that live in the apartments over by Mahoney's and that used to be a foundry, and that it was brownfields, and so we were restricted to what we could do there. The Sawdust District, where the Menominee Nation Arena is, that whole district is contaminated. So I'm just curious if any of your studies or anything you saw when you were looking for suggestions or changes in ordinances dealt with soil contamination.
Steve, I think they talked earlier about total suspended solids being reduced in one of the applications.
Yeah,
30%.
I know. I'm just curious.
Which one was that?
The firm pavement section.
Sorry.
It was suggested that Madison reduce total suspended solids by 40%, and that's just letting all the solids through the gaps in the pavement, or letting them seep through actual land. So I mean, there is suggestions that reducing salt will reduce the contamination. There is no paperwork or studies that suggested hard facts for it, but there is people saying you should lean towards these things that would increase the reduction of it.
I got one more. All right, so just, some of you may have looked at some of our quotes, and did you look at any of our, when you were giving us our grades, any of our impervious areas during development that are required, or guidelines to see how we're doing in terms of, let's say it's a subdivision. Did you look at any of the actual development there and what we're doing on our percentages of impervious surface area that were added to any of the recent subdivisions, or at all?
Yeah. So both that question and the last one speak to the really technical nature of what we asked the students to do this semester. The Green Infrastructure Audit tool includes, I think, 13 sections. Do you remember how many? 15 sections, and we did 4 of them this semester, just in order to make this a more manageable project and not really knowing exactly how deep into the code language we'd be able to get. There is another section of the audit that involves that exact question, perhaps coming to a senior seminar in the future, I don't know. And then
Well, there's only 800 pages in our years.
right, exactly. And Julia Nordic is here from UWC Grand, and she was mentioning that they actually do have some publications that we didn't really address that deal exactly with your question about redeveloping areas and how to think about and manage green infrastructure on those areas in particular, and we can provide that information to you too.
Great job.
Any other questions from anyone? Darren? No?
One last one. Did any of you look at rain gardens in addition to rain barrels and permeable pavement as any of the other communities or benchmarks?
That was mentioned in one of the.
Rain gardens.
Yeah, they talked about rain gardens.
I missed it, sorry. Architectural design.
She'll pick it up from the report. Okay, well, seeing no other questions, I guess we just like to thank you and commend you once again for all the hard work. We really appreciate the university collaborating with us on this, and it's wonderful. And we do hope that other senior seminars will bring us, you know, keep coming. We like this. And as you can see with the idling law that I don't remember if that was your class, Jim. That was 2 semesters ago, I think. It makes stuff happen.
That's fantastic.
And we really appreciate that. So I know a lot of you aren't Oshkosh residents long-term, but you're still very much helping the community, so thank you for that.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
That's what I thought.
Okay,
I could see the radio part, I couldn't see the other words.
We'll give them just a minute or two to move around the room, and then we'll continue with our meeting.
Different from what I went to college.
Well, we each get
That's
fine.
Oh, interaction.
Yes,
To go in and do things that specific, of course, I was in history.
Awesome.
Subjects that
Oh, Lord, I feel like there's air conditioning just going like around the back of my neck right now.
I would, probably in the biology.
Okay.
Right, and then first geology.
Can't hear, we'll have to wait a minute.
We're gonna have to wait a couple minutes.
The room echoes a little bit.
Where did this come from?
Okay, moving on then. The next item on our agenda tonight is an update on the Environmental Leadership Award. Stephen, I believe you have that for us?
Yeah, so the Leadership Award, basically, we did get one nomination from Bill Sturm, and that is for Paul Fowler, I believe. That is, I didn't put it in the materials just because the idea was that we'd get these nominations. We still have a little bit of time for nominations to be received. And then what we'll do is we would form a committee of SAB representatives and then also Rotary representatives that would help decide which ones to move forward and kind of, formally accept and push these nominations forward. So I didn't want to put it on tonight just because, that would imply that we'd be taking action, and I didn't think that was necessary. But I did get those materials from Bill Sturm. He submitted a few letters of recommendation from different people for that. So we do have one for sure. The other part of it is the marketing of it. I talked to Emily Springstro in Oshkosh Media, working with her on marketing the awards. We're still in the process of doing that, so we don't have anything formally set yet with that, but we're still working on that. I'm going to work with Jason Kunkel in our IT department too, and try to get something on our webpage. So that's another thing that I'm still working on.
So it sounds to me like, once again, we can't be working with a firm deadline because we don't have a firm timeline.
It's difficult with, trying to coordinate with everybody else's schedules too, so I'm trying to hopefully get it out there and go from there, but.
Well,
Yeah.
after we get the first one done, we can do that annually,
Yeah.
whenever it ends up, right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you for that update. Okay, any questions on that, anyone? Good, seeing none, let's move on. The Oshkosh Farmers Market handout for next year, because we don't participate in the winter one, we only participate in the summer one. And that's what just went around, the sheet of paper. Would you like to address that, Vic?
Sure.
Would you like to?
So I didn't really receive any other suggestions. I just went with the running list that I had personally come up with.
The goal of like showing all 3 fit on a sheet was just to kind of show too that like I'm trying to maximize as much paper as possible by making them small enough that they are a true handout. I don't want to use a full piece of paper for each one. So just trying to keep it short. I know there's a lot of words. I plan to make it maybe a little bit cuter, nicer visually. We'll see. But also I wanted to add the Facebook link to the bottom of it as like if you want more information or if you want to get involved, you know, check us out here. But that link isn't created yet, so I didn't add it. Honestly, it could probably grow to a half sheet, and then we could just make 2 per piece of paper. But this was just kind of my thought for now. This is just a really rough draft of at least like the content that I was looking for. But if anyone has any feedback, suggestions, things to cut or add, I would greatly appreciate it.
The Oshkosh Committee on Aging has a little program, half page that they hand out to people.
Yeah.
And it says, when do they meet, what their plan is, where do they meet, who's involved, and the various, how you can see us on television, where's the website, where do they meet, what time they meet, and
Is that an extra, Lurton?
It's yours.
Thank you.
So I think combining these 2 could work out.
Yeah.
The size and all can be different, but I thought it was a useful thing to do.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, definitely.
Well, then, if I could make a suggestion, if, now that we have something visually to look at, I know a lot of times that's easier. If we could all review this and then get back to Vic, or actually we get back to Stephen and he'll let Vic know. If we have anything that we'd like to see added, deleted, and then we can work on format and making it pretty and stuff. But this is an awesome start, and thank you. Yes, refuse straws at restaurants. That's a good concept. I like that.
Oh, you'd like that.
Actually,
Yeah.
it's happening. For some reason or other, went to the Olive Garden with a group and they asked, do you want straws or not?
There are several restaurants that have
That are
started
doing
going to
that.
that.
Okay.
Several of them, I had spoken to their managers only 5 or 6 times before it happened, too.
So that's good.
Yeah, Perkins doesn't actually even give you a straw. You have to ask for one.
Same, yeah, even
They
better.
don't, yeah, they don't even carry them in their waitress aprons anymore.
Yeah, there's a lot more of them that are getting on board.
Either.
Correct. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Vic. And if there are things on here that are missing that other people have had thoughts about, please make sure that we get those on there too.
Yeah, and be thinking also about how much do you want to put on something that you hand out to people who, if they're interested, they know where to go to get more.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah, it's
so
very wordy right now.
we have enough to where we could fill up both sides of a piece of paper. And that's more in a way than you need to do, and you're handing out somebody at the
It's more than
Fair.
people will look at, so if
To
we keep it to
some
a few
people
bullet
anyway,
points, yeah. But having a link to go to form more information is
absolutely.
critical.
So
Yeah.
you're gonna add a link to a Facebook page. You're adding a link to what, a Facebook page?
We're
for
going to
the-
create a Facebook
You're
page
gonna
for
create
the
Facebook-
sustainability
Yep.
board.
Okay.
Yep.
We
Okay,
just
so
haven't
that's
gotten it
not
done
up
yet.
yet, but you're-
Yep, it's
okay.
in the works right now. I'm actually doing that as well, and then
Okay.
this will probably be one of the first things we actually post.
Okay,
So,
okay.
yeah,
And then that would go on what we hand out to people.
correct.
And
at
then is
farmers
it worth
markets.
having a link to just like where our agenda is and all that stuff? So
Yeah, we
people
can
know
do
what
both.
things are?
Well, and we have a website through the city, so we could
Uh-huh.
refer them to the sustainability part of the website.
Right,
So
yeah.
there's a lot of different resources listed there too.
Uh-huh.
We just have to have the initial thing and something there to capture their attention.
Oh, sure, no.
The only question I have is the number 2, the shop at local businesses instead of retailers that use plastic or styrofoam packaging. Because some local places do use plastic
True.
or styrofoam
Yeah.
packaging, so I'm trying to think of.
Yeah, my
I don't
thought was like
know if there's-
shipping materials. Like that was the intention.
Okay.
You know, like styrofoam peanuts and like the big plastic
Mhm.
bubbles. But yes, I see what you're saying. The wording
And-
isn't very clear. I can definitely
Yeah,
work on
maybe
that.
change
Not
that,
necessarily
yeah.
retailers, or instead of, I don't know.
Well, and
It's like
also to
shop
reduce
local food.
travel miles for the products
Right.
that we're, so, All you have to do is figure out a way to say that and incorporate it.
Right?
Yeah, can you take care of that?
Working on it. First attempt, shot down.
Depends on the shipper too, what
Not
they
shut
use
down
for
at
their
all.
packaging material. You know, it depends if it's a local business, if they're shipping stuff in. It's a little
Yeah.
tricky to balance that.
You shop at local businesses instead of online, where items need to be shipped and packaged and.
Well,
plus
stuff
the
has to get here
materials.
somehow, no matter what it is.
Local
but-
businesses may be importing stuff unless they're only locally
Right,
produced.
right.
You know.
But they're getting more at once, just that location, if you go to there to get it, instead of the individual item also, but then again being shipped out.
Right.
Because, I mean, even
One less
distributors get
shipping.
it from the manufacturer and then.
Okay, one thing we're not gonna devolve into is a discussion of how things ship, because that's, we know that's a lot. Anything else on the sheet?
I just wrote down to combine 1 and 3 there. They're both
One and-
reusable shopping bags.
Oh,
Are you
yeah.
looking at-
Yeah.
Oh,
Either
to
make
utilize,
room for something
sure.
Max
else, or-
ones for grocery and, yeah, just combining them. I can do that.
For veggies,
Oh, for produce, yeah.
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 But this is very helpful and useful, and thank you.
Yes.
Not a problem.
And probably some things that not
awesome.
everyone thinks of, so, excellent.
Right, I'm already like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Why haven't I been doing that?
Right.
Okay, it's kind of like when somebody came over to my house and came out of the bathroom with the toilet paper roll and handed it to me, and she said, "I assume you recycle these, so I didn't throw it in the garbage." And I'm going, this was a few years ago, I have to, in my own defense, but I never thought, do you recycle your little tubes, your little, who?
Good for arts and crafts too.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes, I know you use binoculars for
Yeah.
them for Bird Fest,
Right?
but
Yes.
that's the only place mine
That's
had been
where all
going.
mine go.
Yeah,
You can also
yeah,
use them for
exactly.
cords, for keeping them together. After you wrap them, you can stick that on there to keep them from unwrapping.
Let's just have a whole sheet of what to do with your toilet paper
And we'll have a
rolls.
Facebook post about it.
Yes, we
Yeah,
will.
hey.
Yes, and people can add to it. I love it.
I have little hyphen suggestions that I.
Okay, next item. If there is anything else on that handout, please get the info to Stephen.
I'll just give it to Stephen.
Yeah.
You don't need to talk.
Our next meeting will be held on Monday, January 7th. We will be back hopefully in City Hall. We'll have an elevator again, maybe.
Yep, I believe meetings through December 31st will be here, and then after that, we'll be back over there. Yep.
Unless we get some other notice.
Yep, I'll let you know if anything, if there's any delays or any problems.
Okay, so, agenda items for future meetings. At the next meeting, our current plan is to complete the sustainability plan. We're gonna do the last chapter and workshop tonight, and then hopefully we can, I've committed to Stephen over the holidays that I will take time to, between us, I'm sure we'll get this done, to format everything the same and get it all set for final approval. So that's one thing. Usually in January, we also do kind of our roadmap for the following year, our goals. So it would be nice if that goes along really well with approving the sustainability plan. So hopefully those two things can happen. We do have another item that we need to put on our January agenda, the bike and ped plan.
The bike lanes.
The bike lanes
Yep.
for West Haven.
Yep, West Haven bike lanes, that discussion. I'm gonna try to get the board some information on that, some of the background, some of the context. There's been a lot of discussion on it, there's different points of view. A few boards have weighed in already.
There has been some newspaper coverage of it that we can go back and use, so that's helpful. So, yeah, we'll have info on it before we are ready to discuss it.
Yep. So basically, this board will be tasked with, as your name implies, the advisory role, coming up with, a recommendation for the plan commission and the city council essentially. As to whether we keep those, do we compromise somehow? Do we vote that it might be better to take them out? What's the answer? So that's kind of, I think they're looking for your recommendation essentially at that point, but we'll get into that in the meeting and I'll send the materials out before that.
It'll be sort of like the Oregon Street Bridge. Everybody will have a different opinion and then they'll just decide what to do, right?
Just push it off for another 10 years.
Well, yeah, that works too. Is there anything else for future meetings that you would like to bring up?
I think for me, I was gonna put the bee and chicken ordinances back on. And there was a resident that wanted to pull a beekeeping permit that he had some questions about the current bee ordinance and some of the, in particular, the sizing of the hives that we require, you know, the maximums that we have, because we don't allow hives bigger than a certain size. So he might come in and weigh in, and I wanted to put the old ordinance and then the revisions to date on the agenda so that we could consider those and maybe hear some of the discussion. And
Are those out of legal now?
they're still up there, but I've gotten a few edits back from the attorneys. So I think we're really close. This stuff should be just really very fine tuning and stuff at this point. I think we have enough to look at, I believe.
Super, okay.
Yep.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like us to think about for any upcoming meeting? It doesn't have to be January's. No? Okay, if you think of anything, just let Stephen know. Okay, then, I believe we could adjourn to workshop. Do I hear a motion?
So move.
Second? And all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Let's do it.